It all begins a long time ago, beyond the misty forests and whispering hills, where those who guarded the great secrets of time lived. This mysterious group was known to humanity simply as the Druids. They acted as guardians of harmony and order, carving runes under oak trees and being recognized as great philosophers. Furthermore, these old sages also guided many lost souls onto the right path during their lifetime. But now this golden age has come to its end. Having finished his long journey, the noble soul of an ancient druid finally begins his path of reincarnation through the stars. Wandering the universe for eons, he searched endlessly for a vessel worthy of his spirit's magnitude and ends up finding one. Although the chosen body was quite fragile and twisted in pain, aside from that, it served his magical purposes perfectly. Thus, the druid Theophil, facing the crossroads between an endless wait and a new life, chooses the young Kang Sihyeon as his new vessel. Right after, a boy starts crying desperately, calling for his older brother to see if he can hear him. At that moment, the heartbeat flatlines, indicating that the only thing left now was to take over the body and keep the old calling alive. Then Theophil wakes up in an unfamiliar place that is completely filled with strong smells, very different from what he was used to. He soon realizes there is something very strange with his own body, feeling that something went terribly wrong during this soul transition. Hearing the boy's cry calling for him again, the druid notices that the language and writing there were things he had never seen before. Despite this, the meanings piece themselves together naturally in his head, making the MC wonder if he hadn't acted too fast. The boy with colorful hair soon asks if the big guy can recognize him there in the bed, breaking the confusing mood of the moment. At that exact second, a violent epiphany strikes the MC's mind like a lightning bolt falling straight from the sky. As soon as he locks eyes with the youngest, named Siu, the old memories start flooding his head like puzzle pieces. The amount of invasive information is so overwhelming that he grabs his own head, feeling immense pain while lying there on the stretcher. Among these chaotic memories, he discovers exactly who the original owner of that enormous body was. It becomes very clear what he did for a living daily, and the kind of pain and humiliation he suffered in that awful corporate environment. He endured his office coworkers taking advantage of his goodwill and throwing more and more responsibilities onto his tired shoulders. The routine was so exhausting that the poor guy's diet consisted of instant food in the middle of a desk full of trash and papers. Not to mention entire nights spent working alone in a dark room, drowning his sorrows with drinks to try and relieve the accumulated stress. Until reaching the fateful memory of how he ended up meeting his sudden tragic fate, collapsing in the middle of the street. It took a good while for the new owner of the body to finally regain his senses after absorbing all that baggage from the past. The departed one's entire journey came back very naturally, causing the emotions of those moments to be relived internally as well. Thanks to these intact memories, the MC realizes he won't need to worry about adapting, but he knows the situation will be tough. Anyway, he accepts with an open heart that from now on his new identity in this world is officially Kang Sihyeon. Trying to get some fresh air, he walks with great difficulty through the hospital's outdoor area, getting extremely out of breath with every step he takes. Completely exhausted, he finds that situation quite unexpected, since the current body weighs 374 pounds and has a huge waistline. The doctor had even warned that the young man passed away at 28 years old when his heart gave out, and that only rigorous physical exercise could save him. Sitting on a bench to rest his legs, the big guy thinks that at least the vessel will be perfect once he fully recovers. Accustomed to doing long fasts in his past life, he stares at his own hands, realizing what the real and biggest problem is right there. Concentrating a bit of his inner magical energy, he manages to make a small flower bloom in the pot next to him. The plant shines brightly with a green aura, showing that his natural abilities still work perfectly in that new world. However, this small display of power ends up consuming his strength rapidly, causing the magic to fade away instantly. Right after, the petals lose their magical appearance and return to their normal state as if nothing had happened. This simple gardening trick leaves the ex-druid completely slouched on the bench, totally breathless and exhausted. Gasping for air with difficulty, he tries to catch the breath that his overloaded lungs are begging for. It's frustrating to think that all the natural force he gathered vanished just to open a single flower, putting even his survival at serious risk. This energy is essential not only for casting spells, but mainly as the primary engine to keep that body alive and functioning properly. Since the force dissipates as soon as it's gathered, the MC stares at the small spark, fully aware that he is in a pretty complicated situation for a mage. At that moment, while he plans to increase the intensity of his physical training, his younger brother comes running across the courtyard shouting his name. The young man shows up giving him the biggest scolding in the world, indignantly questioning why he is pushing himself so hard knowing he has a weak heart. Trying to calm things down, the big guy brushes it off saying he's just his brother, but the boy remains furious about that completely exaggerated effort. He assures him that he is taking it easy, making the younger one sit beside him, still grumbling about his weakened heart condition. Calmer and looking away, Siu takes a deep breath and mentions that the child his brother saved on the street is only 6 years old. Pleased with the news of the rescue, he just agrees, while mentally accessing the final moments of the original owner's life. On that terrible occasion, the old Sihyun used his own weight to block an out-of-control scooter going downhill at high speed. At the moment of impact, the feeling of that little girl clinging to him brought an intense mix of worry, joy, and immense relief. Right after the heroic act, his damaged heart couldn't take it and caused him to pass out, but the only thing that mattered was the little girl's well-being. Back in the present, the youngest stays in absolute silence staring at the ground, visibly downcast about the whole situation that almost ended in tragedy. Giving the MC a light punch on the back, the boy acknowledges the kindness of the act but still feels a bitter tightness in his chest. Holding back tears of despair, Siu begs the older one to think about him too, since he wouldn't have anyone else in life if he lost him. A warm feeling washes over the ex-druid, feeling an enormous happiness upon realizing that these bonds now belong to him as well. Full of determination, he suddenly stands up declaring that he is going to focus entirely on his health, leaving his brother desperate as he tries to hold him back. Acting super casual, the big guy casually mentions that he quit his job, catching the kid completely off guard. He explains that his shady manager stole a 3-month project from him, making Siu explode with anger, calling his terrible boss all sorts of names nonstop. Faced with such outrage and yelling, the MC agrees somewhat awkwardly, leading the boy to find that apathetic and resigned reaction quite strange. Scratching the back of his neck to play it off, he justifies himself saying it feels more like resignation, since those memories don't exactly feel like his own. Moving past the job topic, the youngest asks what he plans to do with his life now, suggesting he should just rest peacefully. The MC reveals his crazy idea of selling the apartment to move to the countryside, which makes Siu freak out thinking he's going to become a farmer. Finding the younger one's panic amusing, he clarifies that he won't be working the fields, he just wants a more isolated place to focus on his recovery. Excited by the well-thought-out answer, the young man remembers that his brother always liked working with soil and thinks it's a great idea to keep a small garden. Internally, the ancient druid knows he needs an entire forest as soon as possible, because being without contact with nature gives him the chills. At that point, Siu brings up his brilliant idea for him to start recording videos for his old internet channel again, but the big guy immediately dismisses the suggestion out of pure laziness. Persistent and annoyed, the youngest shows his phone screen proving that subscribers keep demanding the profile owner's return. To try and bend the older one's stubborn will, the boy gives him a gentle headbutt on the back in a needy and appealing gesture. With a look full of worry, Siu confesses that he is very afraid of what his brother might end up doing alone out in the boonies. The young man's trembling, anxious gaze makes it clear that the recent trauma of almost losing his only family still hurts a lot. Unable to resist that cheap emotional blackmail, the wise mage admits to himself that breaking his stubbornness is quite an impressive feat. Completely defeated by the weight of brotherly love, he finally gives in, letting out a sigh and agreeing to the idea of producing content again. Imposing his strict conditions, the big guy warns that he won't show his face and that the recordings will just be like a personal diary with no pressure. Very euphoric about the small victory achieved, the brother sighs in relief and thanks him, wrapping up that quiet moment of conversation between the two. Just then, an unknown girl approaches, catching the attention of the brothers who were chatting peacefully in the hospital courtyard. The ex-druid's body reacts instinctively right away upon recognizing the name of his former coworker, Ayeon. Siu questions who the lady is, while the MC realizes that the former owner really liked her and asks the reason for her visit. His magical intuition goes off immediately, warning him that this woman with a fake look was definitely not a good person. Searching through the departed one's memories, it becomes very clear that the coworker used to use the guy's kindness for her own benefit. Even so, that fragile body's heart still races uncontrollably just being in the young woman's presence. The big guy quickly realizes that the old Sihyun was completely head over heels for that office coworker. She always took advantage of this blind crush to dump all her own work onto his tired shoulders. The freeloader even had the nerve to pin the blame for her own professional mistakes on the poor guy who just accepted everything. Noticing the tense mood in the air, the youngest calls out to his brother, completely clueless about what was going on between the two adults. Quickly, Siu announces he's going to leave them alone to talk in peace, since the lady seems to have come from far away. The woman apologizes for the sudden interruption, but the boy reassures the visitor saying he was already on his way out anyway. Right after, the kid walks away across the courtyard, leaving the ex-druid alone with the girl to settle their business. Completely tired of that annoying situation, the big guy lets out a heavy sigh trying to keep his patience in check. Staring down the former coworker with a serious look, he takes the initiative to break the awkward silence that had settled. With a very cold posture, the MC gets straight to the point, dryly asking what brought the girl to the hospital. This direct and emotionless attitude catches Aeon completely off guard, making the freeloader stutter without knowing what to answer. He clearly notices that the woman was quite shaken by that distant and unexpected tone of voice. Used to being treated with sweet looks and a lot of kindness, that reality check left the girl totally lost for words. Trying to regain her composure, she clumsily explains that the project he was working on is having some very serious issues. Without the slightest interest in the subject, the big guy rests his face on his hand and claims he has no idea what she's talking about. Desperate, the lady begs him to try and remember, thinking that the heavy surgery and general anesthesia affected his memory. However, the ex-druid cuts the subject off immediately, letting her know he has already quit and that project is no longer his problem. The freeloader tries to get closer, being overly dramatic and saying that this lack of information will cause a huge mess for the whole office. Resorting to cheap charm, she begs for help, pretending to be in a terrible spot and desperately needing to be saved. This pathetic act gives the mage the creeps, completely disgusted by that woman's audacity and two-faced behavior. Internally, he compares the former coworker to an evil soul-sucking spirit trying to drain his vital energy. Letting out another exhausted sigh, the MC concludes that the body's former owner had terrible taste in women. Not understanding the obvious rejection, Aeon asks, offended, what he means by that hostile attitude. Not mincing words, the big guy throws it in her face that it's very rude to seek out a sick person just to demand free work. Trying to justify herself any way she can, the girl stutters, claiming she only came to ask for help because he is very competent. But the MC doesn't even let her finish her little show and reinforces that he no longer has any responsibility toward that company. This short and blunt answer makes the woman's pitiful expression quickly turn into pure irritation. Completely losing her patience, she shows her true colors and yells that she only said that because she was looking out for him. Faced with that hysterical outburst, the original body's lingering feelings finally begin to cool down and disappear entirely. The ex-druid understands that he needed to witness this pathetic scene to permanently cut any emotional ties that still remain. With a clear and peaceful mind, he gets up from the bench, letting her know that their useless conversation was over. Without looking back, the big guy turns around and walks away while the former coworker continues to indignantly yell his name. The woman stands frozen in the middle of the courtyard, shaking with anger for having been blown off in such a humiliating and cold way. Completely unhinged, she wishes him a good recovery in a sarcastic tone and screams, hoping he won't regret his choice. Walking back to his room, he ignores the yelling, finding it very funny how easily that woman lies. At that moment, his phone starts ringing non-stop with a bunch of calls from the old office demanding delayed results. With a faint smile on his face, the mage decides to ignore all the calls, focus solely on his own recovery and peace of mind. The days at the hospital begin to pass peacefully, with the ex-druid enjoying the sunny weather out in the courtyard. Until one very pleasant morning, a bowl full of red, juicy strawberries is placed right in front of him. The MC's eyes light up upon seeing the fresh fruit, remembering that a lot has improved since that tense day. Following the medical routine strictly, he has been working out heavily every day and even won over the cheering nurses on the floor. One of the caregivers gleefully explains that the hospital staff brought the special snack to reward the patient's hard work. She kindly warns that his blood sugar is still high, but eating a few berries won't do any harm. Eager for the natural flavor, the ex-druid grabs a big strawberry with his hand and takes a very eager bite. Instantly, a delicious explosion takes over his mouth, leaving the big guy completely amazed by the fruit. The intense sweetness resembles morning honey blended perfectly with the citrusy touch of wild late summer grapes. The nurses find his exaggerated reaction quite funny, commenting that it looks like the young man has never eaten strawberries in his life. With a huge, genuine smile on his face, he agrees, saying it really has been a very long time since he last ate fruit. Internally, the wise mage admits that this simple food is infinitely superior to the liquid slop of his past life. The quality of the food makes him feel like he is strolling peacefully through wonderful magical gardens full of rare plants. At that exact moment, a sudden shock hits the MC's mind, cutting through all his initial euphoria over the taste. Staring at the half-eaten strawberry, he notices a very familiar energy emanating right from the center of that common fruit. To cover up his sudden surprise, he goes back to smiling at the ladies, praising the wonderful food so as not to raise suspicions. The nurse quickly offers him more of the snack, but the ex-druid only pays attention to the small trace of pure mana he felt inside. With that, the big guy's body instinctively absorbs all that natural energy present in the food without any effort. Excited by the discovery, he devours the rest of the bowl, knowing that moving to the countryside will greatly accelerate his magical recovery. The days fly by and the moment to be discharged from the hospital finally arrives, where a nice older lady praises his willpower. Calmly packing his bags, the MC hears his roommate say she has never seen such a determined young man in her life. Thanks to the intense workout routine, he managed to lose 44 pounds in just 3 weeks and even cleared up his skin. With a gentle smile and a much lighter body, the young man thanks her for the kindness and says goodbye, wishing the little old lady a good recovery. Before leaving the room, the wise mage discreetly transfers a good amount of his gathered life energy to the ailing lady. Feeling a sudden comforting warmth, the patient blushes and compliments how handsome the boy looks when he truly smiles. Already outside the building, the ex-druid walks relieved alongside his younger brother, ready to start his new journey. While walking down the streets, he recalls his last conversation where the old lady asked where the young man was going to move to now. At that time, he calmly answered that he was going to seek refuge in the countryside to finish his health treatment in peace. The main goal was to find an isolated place where he could live far away from all the madness and pollution of the big city. He wanted a quiet environment where animals rested freely and the fresh air brought the calmness his spirit needed. Back to the present, the MC turns to the youngest, carrying the bags, and asks if he has ever heard of Biko Mountain. His new destination from now on would be the peaceful and beautiful rural village located right at the foot of that majestic, lush mountain. Finally, the big guy reaches his destination, dragging his bags through the yard with great difficulty. Completely drained from the tiring trip, he tries to catch his breath, his face drenched in sweat. Staring at the old property, the MC realizes he has finally found the right house. Relieved, he mentally gives thanks for having the brilliant idea to send the moving boxes ahead with the truck. Right then, the tall grass around him sways gently as he walks through the place. Passing through the old gate, he remembers that he bought that traditional house through acquaintances of his younger brother. The environment full of old things has a unique charm, mixing the smell of wet earth with old wood. Right on the edge of Biko Mountain, the ex-druid smiles in satisfaction, feeling all the vibrant energy of the location. Resting a bit on the porch, he concludes that coming to the countryside was definitely the right choice. However, his peace of mind is short-lived when he notices an important little detail in the yard. Looking at the backyard completely overgrown with weeds, the mage notes that unfortunately none of those plants are of any use. Giving an awkward laugh, he admits that the former owner's memories are completely useless when it comes to local ecology. Even so, the MC cracks a smile, remembering an old teaching about not caring about the obstacles on the path. Full of energy, he stands up, confident that the force of flora and fauna will always be on his side. Rolling up his sleeves, Sihyun announces that it's time to start cleaning up, since a druid is a true survival expert. Rummaging through the tall grass, he gets excited when he even finds a small old well in the backyard. Next, an old bicycle catches his eye, leaning in the corner. Deciding to take a break from cleaning, the big guy heads straight to the town market to buy some groceries. Walking past the stalls full of products, he observes the intense movement of the local vendors. The traditional Gayeng market is incredibly lively and packed with people doing their shopping. Enjoying the morning sun, the old bicycle remains parked nearby, illuminating the peaceful scene. Amazed by the feast of colors and smells, the MC understands better that this market operates in 5-day intervals. Suddenly, the ex-druid's eyes sparkle with pure enchantment upon seeing something wonderful. Standing in front of a food stall, his mouth waters as he stares at the fresh, warm food. The sight of the golden fried foods and freshly made rolls is simply irresistible. Completely hypnotized, he recognizes those delicious street foods that he only saw in the old body's memories. The vendor notices his intense staring and offers him a snack, giving the big guy a massive scare. Completely panicked, Sihyun waves his hands declining the offer and runs out of there so he won't fall into temptation. Keeping focused on his goal, he promises himself that he will make this body healthy first before eating junk food. A little later, a bald older man stands there with his mouth wide open, watching the new customer approach his store. The big guy arrives at the seed shop asking if it's the right place, startling the owner with his immense size. Looking at the giant customer, the older man notices he has pale skin and droopy eyes that look very much like a gentle puppy. Wasting no time, the MC starts pointing at the shelf, picking exactly what he's going to take. He asks for all the seedlings from one end to the other, leaving the old man surprised that he wants to buy so many tomatoes at once. Excited, Sihyun explains that he loves the fruit and even asks for various vegetable seedlings and different seeds. Seizing the moment, he asks about grapes, and the seller warns that he has 5-year-old vines for 60,000 won. At that point, the bald older man pauses for a moment, analyzing that gigantic purchase from the young man. Worried, the senior warns that it's already past the right season to plant those tomato seedlings. Scratching his head in frustration, the store owner explains that the seeds need warmth, and he is only warning him out of pure conscience. Understanding the vendor's genuine concern, the big guy gives a calm smile. With a radiant aura, he thanks him for the warning, but guarantees there won't be any problems with the planting because he is a druid. Thinking the kid is crazy, the older man tells him to do whatever he wants, grumbling at him not to complain later. Next, the store owner gathers the heavy purchases and finishes bagging everything carefully. Handing over the full boxes and bags, the old man watches the young guy hold everything in his arms without the slightest difficulty. Very satisfied with his new plants, the MC cheerfully says goodbye to the vendor and leaves. The older man stands at the store door watching the kid walk away in total silence. Suddenly, the old man runs outside yelling desperately for the young man in the middle of the street. Completely shocked, he questions if the kid plans to carry all that absurd weight home by himself. In the end, the vendor ends up using his own pickup truck to help transport the seeds. Arriving at the property, the older man helps unload everything, still in disbelief that he wanted to carry all that on a bicycle. Carrying the boxes inside, the ex-druid dies of embarrassment for forgetting such basic details about the modern world. To shake off his frustration, he decides to focus once again on his cleaning task. Organizing the seedlings in a corner, the big guy prepares to finish pulling out all the tall grass from the yard. At that moment, an unfamiliar voice catches his attention, coming right from the entrance of the house. Getting a huge scare, Sihyun comes face to face with a very scary-looking man holding a sickle. The newcomer stares at the MC and comments in a deep voice that he has never seen that young face around there before. With a dark and threatening aura, the man asks if the kid is planning to live in that old house. A short while later, the tense atmosphere completely vanishes with both of them pulling weeds together on the lawn. The neighbor uses his sickle with great agility, cutting the thick brush without any difficulty. Keeping up with the pace of work, the big guy sports a huge smile, paying close attention to every movement. The old neighbor continues to teach him that he needs to fix the fence and prepare very well so he won't suffer during the winter. That grumpy-faced man was actually Grandpa Jiang, the neighbor who came down the mountain just to see who had moved in. Gladly accepting all the help, the ex-druid listens attentively to the valuable tips about rural life and manual labor. During the heavy yard work, Mr. Jiang takes a quiet break, watching the boy work. Observing the young man's dedication, the neighbor concludes that despite his scary size, he is just a very obedient youth. Thinking it's the kid's first time in the country, the older man decides he'll check on him more often. An hour of intense work goes by, leaving the yard completely clean and organized. Finishing up the heavy lifting, the neighbor stands up with difficulty, letting out a groan of exhaustion. At that, he looks over and finds the big guy's reaction strange as he is crouching down. Sihyun makes up a lame excuse that he coughs a lot when standing up due to his smoking habit, getting an annoying scolding from the old man. In reality, Mr. Jiang is hiding that his back is hurting a lot, silently fighting through the severe discomfort. Suddenly, the neighbor lets out a furious yell with his eyes wide open, startling the MC who doesn't understand a thing. A small deer was on the wall, making the old man tell the kid to get a dog right away to protect the garden. Leaving in a hurry, the older man warns the young guy not to forget to fix the fence. Full of rage at the wild animals, old Jiang promises he'll fill them all with holes if he catches them red-handed. Recalling the neighbor's warning about being careful with wild animals, the MC finds it ironic that they would say that to a druid of all people. Lying on the porch with a little kitten by his side, he watches a video and agrees that he must always eat vegetables first. The doctor on the screen advises filling half the meal with vegetables and the rest with high-quality proteins and carbs. Watching closely, Sihyun understands the instructions and hears that exercise alone won't lead to weight loss without a healthy diet. The big guy scratches his head, impressed, remembering that he grew up learning from sages and that in today's world there is much to learn from everyone. In that sense, he finds the internet extremely useful because even with questionable info, experts' channels seem very reliable. Delighted by the lesson, the ex-druid praises the doctor's incredible physical understanding, the result of a long accumulation of knowledge. Soon, he settles on the porch and decides to look for stretches that help with digestion. Suddenly, a loud, shrill noise echoes through the yard, catching the MC completely by surprise. Jumping up in a hurry, he puts away his phone and wonders if that desperate scream was a cry for help. Wasting no time, the young man runs across the property, holding a broom to investigate the source of the sound. Spotting some movement near the fence, he raises his makeshift weapon, getting a huge scare. Shocked by the unexpected scene, the big guy hesitates for a moment, trying to understand what invaded his yard. He soon realizes that the intruder crying desperately there on the ground is just an injured baby deer. Putting the broom away, Sihyun approaches very slowly, asking for quiet and trying to calm the scared little animal. Noticing the whimpering fawn's panic, the MC assures him that everything is okay and that he is going to help. With great care, he pets the little animal's head, asking him to stay calm. Emanating his vibrant green energy, the ex-druid initiates a natural resonance to communicate telepathically with the creature. Through the gentle touch on its fur, all of the fawn's intense emotions flow straight into his mind. Immediately, Sihyun gets the urgent message and asks if the little one's mother is in danger somewhere. The magical connection clearly shows the agonizing image of the doe fallen in the brush, with her leg caught in a cruel trap. Without thinking twice, the fawn bolts toward the forest, guiding the big guy who runs right behind. Keeping up with the hurried little animal's pace, the breathless young man begs him to slow down a bit. Climbing that steep mountain with his heavy body proves to be a terribly exhausting task for his weak heart. Panting and breaking a cold sweat, he gathers all his willpower, knowing he can't stop to rest with a life on the line. Pushing his way through the dense bushes, the ex-druid finally comes across the disturbing scene in the forest. The little fawn quickly approaches the injured doe, which is still stuck in the metal trap hidden on the ground. Completely exhausted, the young man sits next to the two animals, asking if the mother is bearing the pain. Analyzing the serious wound that reaches the bone, he mutters in frustration and starts looking for something useful around the area. Just then, the big guy turns his head in surprise as he notices a very peculiar presence emanating nearby. The area around the trap glows intensely with a magical aura, leaving the mage completely amazed by the discovery. Impressed by the purplish energy, he realizes he was in such a hurry that he ignored the immense life force of that mountain. Understanding the potential of the place, he quickly gets up, concluding that this region must hide incredible resources. Walking a bit through the bushes, the young man sighs in relief when he finds exactly what he was looking for. Under a tree, several medicinal herbs glow with the same purple energy that covers the entire forest. Rushing back with the leaves in his hand, he apologizes for the delay and tells the animals to hang in there. Not knowing the magical plant's name, the ex-druid crushes the leaves directly onto the wound, using his own strength to boost the effect. Emanating a restorative green light, he heals the deep gash while calmly letting them know everything will be fine. The injured doe finally regains consciousness, bringing relief to the MC, who asks if she is already feeling better. Watching the happily reunited family, he is thankful the trap is small and decides to buy wire cutters on his next trip to the market. Sighing from exhaustion, the big guy wipes the sweat from his forehead, noting that the sun has completely set during the rescue. Turning to the rescued animals, he kindly asks exactly where their den is in the forest. On the morning of the following day, the peaceful and sunny weather takes over the quiet rural property. However, the peace is broken by the groans of pain from the ex-druid, who is shaking all over while physically exerting himself. Completely drenched in sweat, the guy holds a squatting position on the porch, ordering himself to hold on for 30 more seconds. Watching his owner's torture session, the little kitten just yawns lazily, stretching out peacefully on the floor. Collapsing on the porch from exhaustion, the big guy complains that his thighs are burning and that getting in shape is proving to be far from easy. He remembers that the night before he carried the injured doe to the nest and left healing fruits, hoping for a speedy recovery. Sitting on the wooden floor, Sihyun stares at the forest, reflecting on the unexpected events that happened on the mountain. The young man confesses that he thought the place was ordinary, but the rich ecosystem and purple aura would surely leave his old master speechless. Finding the situation amusing, he rubs his chin, admitting that living next to such a pure energy source ends up awakening his greed. Suddenly, the ex-druid remembers the camera is on and ends the recording in a casual way, wrapping up his morning workout routine. Walking to the garden with his tools in hand, the MC tells the cat that the time has come to work the soil. Wearing baggy clothes and a straw hat, he stretches his arms, very excited to start the highly anticipated planting. The big guy checks the recently bought seed packets with a gleam of excitement in his eyes. Analyzing his stock, he lists the tomato, grape, carrot, and lettuce seeds he brought from the local market. Quite confident, the young man gets ready to put all his ancient knowledge into practice. Holding one of the pots very affectionately, he decides to show his true skills. After all, being a druid is a highly respected class. Recalling the long path of asceticism, he thinks about the rituals of nature's choosing and the decades of rigorous teaching since childhood. Prepping the soil for the seeds, he jokes that people in this world see druids as cute little fairies, but they are actually highly trained professionals. Throwing the gardening shovel on the ground with attitude, the MC decides to show off his talent in a grandiose way. Oozing confidence, the ex-druid guarantees that planting these simple little seedlings will be an absolutely easy task. However, a sharp pain shoots through his back right then, breaking the mage's entire posture as he yells in pain, questioning if it was really that easy. Panting on the dirt floor, he suffers the physical toll that his heavy body demands from crouching for hours planting seeds. Aching all over, the big guy finally understands that running across the whole mountain the day before exacted a huge price on his muscles. Despite the terrible pain throughout his whole body, his eyes sparkle again with unshakable determination. Gripping the shovel tightly, the young man refuses to surrender to fatigue before finishing the job. Going back to playing with the dirt very happily, he reinforces that it's his responsibility to ensure those little seedlings grow healthy. Hyped up by his own willpower, Sihyun wipes his sweat and focuses entirely on finishing the planting once and for all. Perfectly aligning the seeds in the furrows, the ex-druid feels the pure ecstasy of performing the sacred act of bringing life to the world. A good while later, he lets out a long sigh of relief next to the many finally empty buckets and pots. Under the late afternoon's orange light, the big guy stretches in the middle of the yard, celebrating that he finished the heavy work. Admiring the perfectly organized lines in the dirt, the young man concludes that the result turned out much better than he expected. Pleased with his own handiwork, he overflows with joy, praising the perfection of his humble garden. To close out the day on a high note, Sihyun releases his vibrant green magic, making the little sprouts tear through the earth instantly all around him. Enchanted by his own vibrant magic, the MC is surprised to see the small seedlings sprout from the earth instantly. Finding that scene the cutest thing in the world, he notices how the little leaves were born super green and full of life. With that, Sihyun wonders if his body isn't recovering much faster thanks to the enormous natural force radiating from that mountain. A kitten approaches meowing on the porch, prompting the big guy to praise the feline's hard work and mention that now he just needs to water the garden. Suddenly, a noise at the entrance catches the young man's attention, making him turn his head right away to see who is arriving. The silhouette of the old neighbor appears at the gate asking who is there, making the ex-druid curious about the sudden visit. Recognizing Mr. Jeong immediately, the MC smiles while the older man gives a fake cough to announce his arrival. The neighbor questions why the kid is just standing there in the yard and jokes saying he can't come in without being invited first. Finally stepping onto the property, the older man explains that he actually only showed up there because he brought a very important person to introduce him to. Very polite and not suspecting a thing, Sihyun just extends his hand, inviting the guests into his yard. At that, old Jeong points to the elegant older lady with short hair accompanying him, revealing that she is the village chief. This information catches the big guy completely off guard, making him stutter in surprise at the woman's title of authority. Letting out a chuckle typical of wealthy folks, the lady stares at the newcomer with quite a bit of interest. Emanating an intimidating purple aura, the village chief asks if he is the famous young man who came from Seoul to live there. Quickly, the young man bows in respect, agreeing with the woman, while feeling the weight of that lady's commanding presence. The elderly lady continues to look the ex-druid up and down with a super sharp gaze, leaving the poor guy sweating with nervousness. Internally, he frantically wonders why that woman is checking him out like that, while she just hums thoughtfully. Breaking the tension, the other woman points in surprise, asking if that bird on his head is a pet, giving the young guy a huge scare. The village chief comments that she has lived in that region for many years, but had never seen anyone walking around with a little bird on their head. Changing the subject quickly, she explains she only came to visit to see if the young man was having any problems with the new house. She justifies her concern by mentioning that the property is quite old, and she was worried the city boy might be very uncomfortable there. Hearing these kind words, the MC lets out a sigh of relief, realizing she is just a good-hearted person. Thanking the chief for her concern, he lets her know he intends to make some repairs in the future, but that for now he has no major issues. However, old Jeong turns his head curiously upon noticing something different in the kid's yard, completely cutting off their conversation. Utterly impressed, the neighbor asks when the kid managed to set up such a beautiful garden and steps closer to take a good look. The village chief also notices the well-kept garden, looking quite surprised by the newly arrived young man's skills. Staring at the soil, Mr. Jeong is shocked to see the green sprouts and questions if the seeds planted yesterday have already germinated. Sweating cold at the discovery, the big guy stutters, lying that he actually planted seedlings, and the old man buys it, saying they look very strong. To ease his own conscience, the mage thinks that some of the vegetables really were seedlings and the grapevines were cuttings, so it wasn't a total lie. Chuckling, the lady praises the boy, thinking a Seoul resident would only know how to plant lettuce, while he states he needs a lot of vegetables. Not understanding the reason for the diet, the lady looks confused, making the boy casually explain that he is urgently trying to lose weight. Giving his arm a little pat, the village chief bursts out laughing, saying a man needs to be sturdy and that looking like that women would line up. Getting back to the focus of the visit, the elderly lady asks if there is anything else the young man needs to settle better in the village. Mr. Jiang chimes in, claiming that a big city boy knows nothing about country life and tells him to ask for help without fear. As soon as he hears this generous offer, the MC's eyes light up intensely as a brilliant idea for his yard comes to mind. With a huge smile on his face, the ex-druid politely asks if he could ask a big favor from the two older folks present there. A few hours pass peacefully on the rural property, with birds flying in the calm afternoon weather taking over the mountain. A muscular man in a hard hat smiles in satisfaction after his hard work, loudly announcing that the structure is finally ready. The big guy can barely hide his extreme happiness, practically glowing with excitement seeing the result of the construction in his yard. Staring at the brand new plastic greenhouse set up on his land, the mage is completely amazed by the perfect build. The neighbor laughs, commenting that the workers finished very fast even with the last-minute request, thanks to the village chief's influence. Mr. Jiang finally understands that this was the big favor the kid wanted to ask earlier, and Sihyun excitedly nods in agreement. The MC explains that he intends to grow various ornamental plants inside it to protect them from the rain, but that he doesn't plan to sell anything yet. Impressed, the older man figures the kid knows a lot about plants, and takes the chance to ask him to look at a wilting orchid at his house. Adjusting the hat on his head in a friendly way, the old neighbor announces it's time to feed the dog and that he has to go. Bowing his body in gratitude, the big guy politely says goodbye to the neighbor and the workers, wishing them all a safe trip back. Watching the folks leave through the front gate, the ex-druid smiles serenely, feeling that things are going very well. Staring at his plot of land with pride, the young man mentally celebrates that he finally managed to build his very own plastic greenhouse right there. Entering the newly built space, he turns on his phone camera on the selfie stick and starts recording the highly anticipated video for his subscribers. Oozing charm for the camera, he shows the transparent structure, stating he feels like his biggest dream has come true. Pointing to the beautiful pots, he explains in the video that those ornamental plants are very sensitive to the region's temperature and humidity. Thinking he has recorded enough content for now, the boy pauses the recording on his phone so he can focus on what really matters. Dropping the device on the ground, the mage crouches in the middle of the greenhouse, rolling his shoulders and getting ready to use his secret skills. Touching the earth with both hands, he casts a circulation spell, making an emerald green energy run through the whole soil instantly. With focused eyes, the MC closely watches the dirt react to his magic, and is pleased to see that the ground has started to move. Earthworms and microorganisms begin to appear in the loose soil thanks to the Druid's spell, which activates the life of the tiny beings using the force of nature. Grabbing a nice handful of dark dirt, the young man sighs in amazement, admitting it had been a long time since he'd seen such living soil. His mind quickly wanders back to his past life, remembering the time when he served as a powerful guardian in a huge oak forest. In that ancient era of glory, he was very used to cultivating large orchards full of olive, apple, and juicy pear trees. However, focusing on the present, his heart flutters with excitement just thinking that this mountain is full of medicinal herbs ready to be grown. Planning to turn the greenhouse into a medicinal herb nursery, he knows he'll need to buy lots of books, because the internet has limits to its knowledge. Suddenly, a notification chime cuts through the greenhouse's silence, grabbing the ex-druid's attention as he looks curiously at the device lying in the dirt. Staring at the phone's lit screen, the kid notices there are several alerts for new comments on his recently uploaded video on the channel. Reading the messages from subscribers calling him a fairy and praising his weight loss, the young man is left speechless by the absurd amount of affection. Scratching his face a bit awkwardly, he admits he never expected such a positive reaction from the public, feeling a very comforting warmth fill his chest. The big guy thought that daily video would be super boring and dull to others, but concludes that people really love true stories. He remembers the ancient peasants around the campfire, who listened to stories to get emotional, discuss, and use it as motivation to change their lives. Reading a bit more of the supportive messages, the MC flashes a sweet smile, feeling that all his hard work is finally being recognized. Petting the lazy kitten by his side, the wise mage sighs in relief, confirming that his intuition about that move was more than correct. Looking out over his humble property surrounded by that vast green forest, the ex-druid states loud and clear that he absolutely loves coming to the countryside. The next morning, the sun rises brightly, illuminating the gardening tools left in the yard and bringing new energy to the old house. Stepping onto the scale in the middle of the room, the boy's eyes widen, getting a huge shock from the numbers that appeared on the small digital display. Clenching his fists in celebration, he vibrates with joy upon realizing that he lost an incredible 46 pounds since the beginning of his treatment. The young man understands that all that natural energy from the mountain is strengthening his vessel, and that if he keeps it up, he will be 100% better in no time. Completely ignoring his big owner's morning excitement, the fat kitten just stretches out on the wooden floor with the utmost laziness in the world. Walking peacefully down the dirt road, the MC records a video mentioning he plans to water the garden and then visit the neighbor. To pass the free time, he decides to do a QA session while reading his followers' comments on the screen. One of the messages catches his eye, making the boy laugh when he sees a subscriber asking his height and comparing him to a fighter. Feeling a bit awkward, Sihyun confirms that he is 6 feet tall as measured at the hospital, remembering that his weight remains the same. Just then, a new comment asks him about the holes in the perilla leaves shown in the previous video, and whether he avoids using insecticides. Thoughtful, the big guy explains he prefers not to use any kind of poison on the plants, since that whole harvest will be for his own consumption. Getting an idea, the ex-druid excitedly reveals he plans to use the strong scent of mint to naturally ward off the insects. Pleased with the interaction, he wraps up the recording thanking the audience for their love and asking them to send more questions whenever they'd like. Suddenly, a very loud, shrill noise echoes in the background, catching the young man completely by surprise in the middle of the street. Not understanding the situation, Sihyun looks around, immediately recognizing that familiar crying coming from somewhere close by. Turning his head quickly, his vision focuses on the end of the road trying to identify what is causing all that commotion. The boy soon realizes it is precisely that same baby deer running desperately towards him down the path. At that exact moment, a mysterious man appears in front of him, aggressively yelling for the MC to get out of the way. The sudden scare leaves the mage completely dazed by all that rushing happening so quickly. Looking at the scene, he sees old neighbor Jiang running furiously with a shotgun in his hand while yelling at the poor animal. Seeing the barrel of the gun scrape by, the big guy freezes in shock at the old man's extreme and dangerous behavior. Totally blinded by rage, the older man runs right past the boy, yelling orders for the beast to stop running immediately. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the ex-druid breaks into a cold sweat of pure terror, fearing for the life of the little deer he had rescued earlier. Running for his own life, the fawn flees desperately from the armed neighbor, making it clear the animal is in huge danger. A booming gunshot suddenly cuts through the air. Blind with rage, old Jiang yells orders for the animal to stop running immediately while he keeps firing mercilessly. Desperate at the scene, Sihyun runs after the older man, begging him to wait a second and warning him he can't shoot. Seeing that the neighbor can't hear a thing over the noise of his own running, the big guy concludes the animal is in grave danger. With no other choice, the ex-druid steps firmly on the grass, unleashing his verdant magic to try and intervene in the situation. Using his powers, he casts an immobilization spell, making magical roots sprout rapidly from the earth. With the magic's impact, the thick vines firmly grip the shooter's legs, giving him a huge scare. Losing his balance, old Jiang falls to the ground completely confused by it all, while the boy runs up asking him to be careful. Sitting on the grass panting, the older man tries to figure out where those roots came from, right when the MC finally reaches him. Stepping in front of the scared little animal, the young man asks him to calm down, but the neighbor tells him to move out of the way so he can teach the beast a lesson. Pressured by the older man's fury, the mage suddenly comes up with a brilliant idea to save the little deer's life. Opening his arms to protect the fawn, Sihyun declares with utter conviction that the animal is actually his pet. Shocked by the revelation, the neighbor asks if he is joking, forcing the boy to confirm that he rescued the animal from a trap. To prove his crazy story, the big guy crouches down and very carefully calls the fawn over to him. Letting out a sound of curiosity, the little animal recognizes his savior immediately, leaving the ex-druid quite relieved. Surprising everyone, the little fawn comes bouncing over toward the young man and throws itself into his arms. Petting the animal, the mage claims he is a good boy, but the neighbor snaps back indignantly, demanding to know why he ruined his crops. Sweating cold from the scolding, the MC awkwardly agrees, while the old man orders him to put a leash on the beast or he'll send him the bill. Walking away, Mr. Jiang lets him know they were blank rounds and that he never hunts fawns, leaving the boy sighing in relief. Strolling into the distance, the older man warns that professional hunters will come during hunting season and suggests he build a stable right away. Turning back quickly, the neighbor mentions the village chief made acorn jelly and invites the young man to come get some later. The old man praises the homemade dish, recommending eating it with lettuce, spicy seasoning, and perilla oil, making the boy thank him very excitedly. Ordering him to take the beast away already, Mr. Jiang resumes his path while the MC wishes him a safe trip back. Finally alone in the middle of the road, the big guy lets out a long sigh of exhaustion after all that stressful mess. Staring seriously at the fawn, he gives it a scolding, warning that the little guy will be in big trouble if he messes with the neighbor's sweet potatoes again. Suddenly, the ex-druid snaps his fingers as he remembers a very important detail regarding the little animal's safety. Pulling a handkerchief from his pocket, he asks the deer to stay still for a second while he carefully ties the fabric around him. Bursting with pride, the little animal shows off his new pink bandana around his neck, looking very happy with the unusual gift. Clapping his hands in excitement, the mage praises his look, stating that now everyone will know he has an owner and won't try to hurt him. His mission accomplished, the young man points to the mountains and tells the little deer to go back home and find his mom. Later that same day, a peaceful mood hangs over Mr. Jiang's traditional home. Savoring the delicious acorn jelly with their chopsticks, the two enjoy the home-cooked meal together. Chewing his food, the neighbor grumbles, baffled by the absurd idea of someone raising a wild deer instead of a dog or cat. Defending his new pet tooth and nail, the MC guarantees the animal is very gentle, leaving the old man in silence. Sensing the purity in the boy's words, the grumpy older man ends up relaxing his posture, showing himself to be a bit friendlier. Watching the friendly interaction, the senior concludes in his thoughts that this newcomer from the city is quite an odd kid. After returning the animal to the mountain, the ex-druid's dragging footsteps echo down the dirt road heading back home. Arriving at the gate of his property, the big guy walks completely drained and breathless after so many emotions in a single day. Right then, a familiar voice suddenly calls out to him, making the young guy lift his head, completely confused by the unexpected visit. Surprised, he immediately recognizes his youngest brother Siu waving enthusiastically in front of the old house. The pink-haired kid asks how he's doing, and Sihyun questions what he's doing there in the middle of a workday, discovering it was his day off. Curious about the other visitor, the mage asks who the guy next to him is, and Siu quickly introduces him as his new manager. The man introduces himself excitedly, acknowledging that the big guy was the one who recommended that property for his younger brother to buy. Analyzing the state of the place, the youngest asks if he likes living there, imagining it must be very hard to take care of an empty house. With a calm demeanor, the MC guarantees he loves the peace of the countryside and invites them both inside for some tea. Stopping dead in their tracks, the youngest and the manager completely freeze, letting out murmurs of pure shock. Staring at the old wooden house, they notice the decaying and creepy state of the ancient property in the middle of the brush. Not hiding his dread, Siu comments that it looks like a haunted house, offending his brother since he scrubbed the whole place with a lot of sweat. The big guy tries to justify himself, saying he only cleaned up the dirt and will do the renovations later, but the visitors are left speechless. The kid with the colorful hair insists it still looks very scary, until something in the yard catches his attention in a surprising way. Pointing to the perfectly aligned garden beds, Siu asks if those are the same ones that appeared in the channel's recent video. Admiring the lush, lively garden, the two visitors quickly change their minds, admitting that the setup doesn't look bad at all. The manager is impressed by the beauty of the place and praises the hard work, leaving the ex-druid feeling quite bashful at the compliment. Suddenly, the man's eyes mysteriously begin to fill with tears, startling the MC who doesn't understand the reaction. Hiding his face in embarrassment, the visitor actually cries, while the mage frantically asks the reason behind all that sudden weeping. Wiping away his tears, the young man explains that this was his late grandmother's house, and seeing someone living there again made him very emotional. Overflowing with gratitude, the manager wishes the new resident lots of health and happiness, and he thanks him, touched by the kind words. Changing the subject, the youngest points excitedly at the new plastic greenhouse in the yard and asks for permission to take a closer look. Getting the green light from his older brother, the boy runs off euphorically, his eyes sparkling with curiosity to explore the place. For a long time, young Siu runs back and forth exploring every little corner of that huge rural property. Seeing his brother overflowing with energy, the youngest shows enormous relief to finally see the big guy looking so healthy after a long time. Time flies by as the three chat excitedly, and soon the sun begins to set, coloring the sky over the small village in orange hues. Getting into the car to leave, the kid analyzes the whole property one more time and states that he completely approves of the new home. Siu confesses he was very worried about the move, but now he can relax knowing the older one adapted perfectly to country life. Pointing his finger playfully, he tells his brother to renovate the house and announces that next time he'll bring the other group members to visit. Letting out a hearty laugh, the MC accepts the renovation challenge and guarantees the place will be perfect to host his friends. Before the car starts, the ex-druid calls out to his younger brother with a soft voice, catching the boy's attention in the passenger seat. With a heart full of gratitude, the big guy thanks them for the surprise visit and asks them to always come back whenever they have free time. Extending his greetings, he also says goodbye to the friendly manager, who gives a warm laugh promising to return soon. Watching the two very helpful visitors, the mage just feels an immense peace having such a wonderful family by his side. Waving out the window, Siu tells his brother to take care and mentions at the last minute that he sent a very special gift that will arrive soon. Curious, the young guy asks what kind of gift it is, but the youngest plays it coy saying he'll find out when it arrives and says his goodbyes. Completely confused by the sudden riddle, Sihyun stands at the gate with a bunch of question marks flashing in his head. The car drives away down the dirt road while the big guy ponders the mystery, leaving only the sound of the engine fading into the sunset. Accepting his new wild companion, the MC decides to name the rescued baby deer with the adorable name of Bengal.